We're back, people. What is up? Another little Dolphins stream. This is second open OTA practice. We got the media out there, so we got to hear a lot more reports about how people were looking and playing. We're gonna go over that today. Mike McDaniel had his interviews. Some of the players are getting interviewed right now. We'll go through some of that stuff, and then just other random Dolphins news. Like I think talk about Jonnu. I think last time we streamed, talked about Jonnu. I think Schefter made another report today saying like it seems the Steelers were unlikely to trade for Jonnu. So as I was saying, I still think it's unlikely he gets traded. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at with that. I think the last OTA stream we did, we talked about the Tua to Waddle throw. We didn't get to show it then, but here it is. They end up showing it here. I know Waddle's had a good camp. Always nice to see, the boys working out there. But yeah, I just think more things when it came to Jonnu about him wanting to stay, which is nice. I think that's kind of what is expected at this point. I think orange jersey yesterday was Tua, and then today's orange jersey was Chop. Definitely makes sense. Yeah, here was the report. Schefter said Pittsburgh has been seeking initial receiving help and has acquired about, but is not expected to trade for Miami tight end Jonnu Smith. So that seems less and less likely. McDaniel had his media availability today. He even talked about Jonnu, saying one thing we stand on is Jonnu's professionalism. That the team's had some unbelievable participation focus. Those are all, he talked about Tua's ownership of the entire operation. Says it's imperative for the QB to execute his job, but since all of them parts directly affect the QB, Tua has been doing a great job not letting the ebbs and flows of practice affect his rhythm. McDaniel talked positively about Jalen Wright. We got to hear more about Jalen. I think even Wright in his interview right now was saying he's up 6 pounds of muscle and he's lost some fat type weight too, which is always nice to hear about that. He's saying like Waddle is already at the top tier, but he sees a guy that's even ready to, grow even more. He said Austin Jackson will be ready for training camp. I think the Dolphins practice in the rain today too, so we got to. Apparently, Tua actually looks pretty good in the rain, just from like the reports, which I think is obviously a positive sign. Dolphins have always kind of struggled in the rain. Yeah, Chop had the orange jersey today. Definitely, I mean, you got to take some of the offensive line, defensive line stuff with a grain of salt because of them not wearing pads. But to start off first, I saw this from multiple different. I'm going to talk usually through what Wingfield tweeted out because I like what Wingfield talks about. But I think a lot of the media talked about it. Grayson Murphy standing out again. I think in the last open OTA, he was the one that stood out. I made a film breakdown on Murphy like about probably around a week ago now. That's one of my guys. I really excited to hear that he's sort of standing out. Love his ability to create pressure. Wingfield said here, practice is wrap. Defense dominated the rain-soaked session. Grayson Murphy opened the team period by oversetting the tackle, then working back inside for the run stuff. If you watch his college film, that kind of fits in right in for what he does. And he said next play he wins for a sack. Grayson, really standing out. He said Chubb and Willie Gay had sacks. Melifonwu and Eugene Asante had a pick. Okay, interesting. That's I think the first I've heard about Eugene Asante in practice. So that's cool to hear. I believe they took advantage of a lot of the backup QBs. Jordan Brooks and Artie Burns both had tackle for losses. Zach Wilson threw the pick, Melifonwu, and Ewers on a tipped ball for Asante, so it was a tipped pass. But I thought this next period was excellent as he was decisive in 7-on-7, fit tight windows. Legit one of the better periods I've seen from a QB not named Tua. Okay, so it seemed like Ewers had a pretty good... Or wait, maybe he was talking about Zach. I can't tell if he's talking about Zach or Ewers from this situation. I think he's talking about Zach Wilson, actually. So Zach had a pretty good period after the fact, after he threw that pick. He said he threw a deep shot to D. Eskridge, made some tough catches. Eskridge has been someone who's actually sort of stood out so far, still obviously very early in the process. He said AJ Henning was Wilson's favorite target. He had some nice route running chops, sink the hips. He's a UDFA that I actually didn't even cover yet, Northwestern kid. He said Jalen Wright hit what I think would have been a 70-yard touchdown. Hit a well-blocked front and then hit an extra gear at the second level. Nice to see that. He said, back to the defense, I was just impressed in general, but in particular with the communication and seamless connectivity. They showed different pre-snap presentations and rotations constantly, and there wasn't a single breakdown that I saw. Love to hear that. That's the biggest thing. I think being able to, do your jobs, the communication connectivity thing has always kind of been a problem for Miami, but that was something they kind of worked on at the second half of last season. And it was probably the biggest strength of Weaver's defense was the pre to post snap rotations that they were able to work out. He said he thought Kader Cole was a big part of that. His leadership and professionalism is on display every period. He says Artie Burns had a similar day. Interesting. I think, we get to hear about that. Chop had a sack and forced another pressure. Orange jersey. DS Courage made a dropping one-handed catch last week. Caught the ball very cleanly in bad weather. He had a catch against Bonner where Ethan was all over him. Ethan had great coverage later on a ball from Tua to Tanner Connor. Connor made a handful of plays today. Tanner Connor, maybe he, can have his chance. Really enjoys Patrick Morris practicing. He trusts his eyes and goes. Lots of positivity there for some of the guys that I definitely like. Rainy day, so that could definitely play a part in it. Miami practice outside. I believe, Joe Shad said Sealer and Jonnu were not spotted. Let's see if he said anything else. Milifano picked off Zach Wilson. Grayson Murphy flashing again. Channing Tindall had a tackle for loss. Ollie Gordon looks fast for a big back. Ewers had some misfires. Jalen Wright had some explosive runs. Kind of the same thing. Nothing too crazy there. Let me see what you guys are saying. Are they live right now? No, Troll. They just ended. I think they're doing interviews right now after practice. Patrick Paul said he's built for this when asked about replacing Teron Armstead. Jalen Waddle talked about the corners on the team. Waddle was saying they look extremely good. I mean, that can all just be, them hyping up their teammates. But it's better to hear him hyping up the corners than talking bad about them. Did you see Kyle Krabs talking about Jay Smith's contract talk breakdown? I don't think I did, Jeb. I don't think I saw that. But yeah. Apparently Waddle says the new wide receiver coach is challenging him to learn to juggle tennis balls, so he's working on hand-eye coordination. Don't mind that. I think that's kind of I just made it. I mean, I love Waddle. I think, the consistency at the catch point has always been kind of his biggest weakness. So him, working on that, I think is always nice to hear. Jalen Phillips didn't participate in 11-on-11s, but did on 7-on-7s. Defense probably won the day, but Eskridge, Grayson Murphy, Jalen Wright. Seems like a lot of the media talking about the same players. Cam Smith was also back out there. That's, definitely a positive for him. He's got to be out there, give himself a chance, Austin Jackson said Tua is a lot more confident and decisive on and off the field. He's a full-blown leader. I do feel like we have noticed that change in Tua. I feel like when he first got here, he clearly wasn't like that at all. Wasn't as vocal, but now it seems like he's quite vocal. Yeah. I think that's kind of a lot of the main stuff that we saw talked about today. I like hearing that Grayson Murphy's had strong practices. I'm a fan of him. I think if the Dolphins can get one of those edges to step up, that's huge for the future seasons for them because of how the edge room is really strong right now this year. But I think edge is one where you could see a potential fall off. So if Grayson steps up, he could be a future player for you. And he was my favorite UDFA the year prior. He unfortunately got injured in that game, but he had a really good pressure profile come out. He got a lot of pressures. It seems like he's still winning in the same way that he won in college at UCLA, taking advantage of oversets, using his quickness and flexibility. Whether it's versus the run or making sacks, he's got good bend to his game as well. So he can win inside, outside, lots of that versatility. I think that will be interesting to see how if he gets used in that sort of capacity. Well, have you heard about Jason Marshall Jr.? I haven't heard anything from nothing. The media hasn't said anything about him in these nothing positive or negative about him in these open practices. But I have read elsewhere that they like what they saw from him early on. So I don't think necessarily hearing a lot of usually sometimes too when you in practices when you hear a lot about corners, that's not usually a good thing actually, because usually that means they're getting beat. It's actually better when you're not hearing anything. The only time it's good when you're hearing stuff is obviously when they're getting interceptions, but it's more likely you're gonna have good coverage than just get interceptions. But yeah, that's kind of I think the little that's been talked about. I think with the rookies actually haven't had too much stuff. I think really waiting for the pads to come on training camp. That's really where you can see guys stand out. I think last year during this time during OTAs we didn't hear a ton about the rookies, so still a very early process. I think Travis Wingfield had the Maryland's coach on his podcast, and you got to hear the Maryland coach talk about Trader and Jordan Phillips and like how much of a leader Trader is. But I mean, we've heard a little bit about like Ollie Gordon. We got to hear about Quinn Ewers, who probably had a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, I think, and then we'll hear more about like Grant, Phillips, Sealer, Savianaya once like the pads come on, because that's when you hear more about like the O line, D line. That's when it like really really matters. This is also, let me pull this up. Let me go here. This is yeah, so Spot Track tweeted this out, trading Jalen Ramsey. Dolphins would have 10.7 mil dead cap 2025, 18 in 2026, and they would save 5.9 million, save 6.5 million. And the new team that acquires him would have to pay him. It would be 5.9 million against the cap in 2025, and 21 million cash pretty much for those first 3 years. But I think this is the big thing, is like they do only have to give up 5.9 million in cap in year one, and I'm sure they can figure out some sort of restructure whoever trades for him. But we're still not there yet. I'm imagining the holdup with it is one, the compensation, but then also like what compensation are you going to get, and how much of the cap hit are the Dolphins going to help take away and stuff like that. Because I think that will be the key for your compensation that you get with the Ramsey trade, because that's still happening. I mean, the Ramsey thing is definitely gonna happen. But yeah. Any other questions? Quick some quick questions. Going quick so far. Just I mean, kind of just waiting for us to really get into the thick of things. I made some film breakdowns. I have that I remember only right now. Ethan Bonner, Isaiah Johnson, Malik Washington, a lot of young guys coming up next. Keep an eye out on those. Trying to look. It would have been crazy. Just watching that clip of Travis Hunter, I don't know if you guys have seen that. Kind of went insane. But yeah, it seems like the defenses have kind of been, at least from what we've seen, defenses kind of stood out, but I think that's kind of the norm usually in these OTAs. Later, troll. Have a good one. Yeah, check out the Malik video. I think Malik Washington will be one of those breakout candidates, especially if the Dolphins do run more 11 personnel, which I think they will try to run more 11 personnel. I think Nick Westbrook-Akine getting added sort of plays into that too. With them being, I don't think they'll trade Jonnu, but I do think they are willing to. That them being willing to trade Jonnu, I think at least shows that they're more comfortable with going into the 11 personnel stuff, and that's something they've been successful in that personnel package. So. But yeah, I think that is pretty much all the stuff that I want to talk about at this moment. I could check. I mean, that was everything I want to talk about with the OTAs. What's up? What's up, B-Rob? Fins up, fins up. Pull up this. But yeah. So back in 2023, the Dolphins didn't run 11 personnel a lot. I believe they were 30th ranked in like the amount they ran 11 personnel. So they were towards the end of the league. 11 personnel is probably the main personnel package that's run in the NFL. If you don't know what that is, 11, the first number stands for how many running backs on the field. The second number stands for how many tight ends. So it stands for 1 running back, 1 tight end, which means 3 receivers are on the field. That's what 11 personnel is. So 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. That's like the most basic personnel package for offenses. The Dolphins didn't run it a lot, but when they did run it, they were quite successful. But the thing is, when you're running 11 personnel, you need more of, especially when the Dolphins offense, having a tight end that can block is helpful. Like Jonnu in obvious passing situations, yes, you want him on the field. But when he is on the field and it's not an obvious passing situation, he will limit you from a perspective of like, okay, you don't want to run with him as your only tight end on the field. Or also, you don't want to, it also get kind of, makes you predictable as it most likely will be a pass. That's why I think bringing in someone like Nick Westbrook-Akine is very helpful because he gives you a bigger body slot option. He's still a receiver, but then he can also block in the slot, like, dig out nickels. And then hopefully, I think that's why they added guys like Pharaoh Brown, who's a vet, and he's a wide tight end. He's not going to give you really anything as a receiver, but he will do some decent stuff blocking-wise for you. So I think, that's why you see some of those guys get added in there. You would still, I think Johnny will still definitely have a role. It's just in those personnel packages, I don't think he'll be on the field a ton. But obviously, they still like to, they were running more 12 last year. 21 is still a big one for Miami. They run 21 a lot, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end. Ready for Jalen Phillips to be back. I really hope Jalen Phillips can have I love Jalen Phillips' play. I thought he was the best defender on the team in the 2023 season. And I really hope he can have a healthy season, not even just for Miami, just, for himself, because it's a big year for him going into the final year of his contract. So hopefully, that works out for him there. Yeah, but do you guys have any questions about anything Dolphins related? Our Lads does have, I was looking at the depth chart on Our Lads and our Lads, and they do have Jonah listed at the right guard and James Daniels at the left guard, which I thought was interesting. That's how they've listed it. I wonder if they got any intel, because they are usually pretty spot on with their stuff. Yeah. Got him there. Just trying to look around. They have Melifonwu and Ashton Davis listed as the safety starters. I think that actually has a decent chance of happening. They like to give stuff out to the vets, give the vets a chance early on. Yeah. Dude, Austin Jackson does look pretty small, but I feel like he's always looked like that. I feel like even in his recent plays, he's always looked small. Because if you look at him, he looks down in weight. Maybe it's just me. Here. Yeah, if you look at him here. I mean, for an offensive lineman, he looks pretty thin, but I feel like he's played pretty small before, and I don't think, his power in the run game's never been his question mark. I mean, he definitely needs to work on his anchor, but that's less of a problem in the Dolphins scheme. But yeah, I think just a little quick stream. That was everything I wanted to talk about real quick. So, thank you guys for watching. See you guys next